Thank you everyone for joining us. Good afternoon. My name is Aliana Ortu. Today we'll be hearing from authors and experts Cari, Tellis, and Orlando Barone about counseling and interviewing in speech-language pathology and audiology. Dr. Tellis is an associate tenured professor in the speech-language pathology department at Misericordia University. Dr. Tellis has authored and co-authored over 50 presentations at national, state, and international conferences. She has published her research in prestigious laryngology and voice journals. Dr. Tellis is a licensed and certified speech-language pathologist and has over 13 years of clinical experience. She has taught a master's level counseling class in speech-language pathology for the past 7 years, and she oversees all vocal rehabilitation services at the Misericordia University Speech-Language Hearing Center. Orlando Barone is the Executive Leadership, Presentation and Performance Coach and Management Instructor at the Wharton School of the University of Pennsylvania in Philadelphia. He's also lecturer, Emerging Leaders Program at the Harvard School of Public Health in Boston. He's a state-certified counselor who has counseled at the high school and collegiate levels. He has over 25 years experience as a coach, counselor, negotiation trainer, change consultant, author, and presenter, specializing in interpersonal effectiveness, negotiation, leadership and management development, performance management, team building, and training design. At this point, I'd like to turn things over to our presenters.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I'm really excited to be here and welcome you all to our overview of counseling and interviewing in speech-language pathology and audiology. Let me begin with a few of the textbook highlights. Our model, the one we not only prefer but use throughout the book and integrate with various traditional approaches to counseling, including behaviorism, humanism, cognitive therapy, and existentialism. The solution-focused model really guides us throughout the book. So we're always concerned with the improvement in the quality of life or the maintenance of quality of life of clients. Therefore, the book contains many practical strategies and skills from beginning to end that we discuss as we talk about the types of counseling interventions that work and are workable with clients. Review questions follow each chapter. These review questions are designed to cover all the material in the chapter. Following that, lecture slides and test questions are included for each and every chapter in the book so that professors are equipped with a deck of slides to use and test questions already available to them to use in instructing the course. Critical thinking problems are inserted throughout the book to help teachers, instructors, and students to think through difficult issues related to counseling. And then, of course, there are a variety of case studies in audiology and speech-language pathology throughout the book. We never present a model or a technique without including right within the book, right there, a variety of case studies to exemplify and illustrate the points we're trying to make. The objectives of our talk today are first, obviously, to review key aspects of the book, talk a little bit about them, define this solution-focused approach that guides our journey through the book, and then pick up on some of the key models that appear throughout the book, beginning with what we call the CI, or Counseling Integration Matrix. We'll then explain the 4 phases of the solution cycle. You'll see that you're able to guide your students through the phases of the solution cycle so that wherever they are in the counseling process, there are techniques and choices to be made and criteria for making those choices. We're going to talk about the 5 intentions of communication and how they apply to the solution cycle, and finally discussing motivation as a connection between the individual and their project, between the individual and what they're doing. Those connections include purpose, growth, and ownership. Okay, how does it all begin? Well, it begins with someone like our friend Mason here. Mason's a happy child, doesn't experience any particular upset or problem in his life. But if you ask Mason his name, he will answer, "My name is Mason." But that doesn't bother Mason. It doesn't bother his parents, who treat Mason with kindness It doesn't bother his friends or classmates or teachers. And then one day, someone walks up to Mason and laughs at Mason, laughs at the way he talks, and says things to Mason like, "You talk funny. You're stupid, Mason. Why do you talk like that? Why can't you make an S sound?" And all of a sudden, that smile on Mason's face turns into a frown. Something has happened to Mason. Mason is experiencing dissatisfaction. Counselors know, as well as clinicians, that dissatisfaction is always the first step in the therapy journey, because dissatisfaction means there's something that needs to be set right in order that satisfaction can be reestablished. As clinicians, it's our job to redefine that dissatisfaction as a problem that we can address, a problem to which we seek a solution. We focus on the strengths of the clinician, their expertise, and their abilities, the strengths of the client, their willingness, motivation, ability, and capability to improve. And those strengths lead us to the goal. The goal is seen in our thinking as the solution to the problem. Now, that would be fine, and everything would work well. In the best of all possible worlds, we would apply our clinical practices, our clinical exercise, our clinical techniques to move the client from a situation in which they're experiencing a problem to the goal in which the problem is overcome. And that would be that. However, other things tend to come into play. Mason isn't just dealing with a technical speech issue. Mason is also dealing with his perceptions about himself and perceptions about the outer world. Perceptions about himself include perceptions about his ability to make progress, to improve, to overcome, to reach a goal. Mason might say to himself, "I'll never be able to say that S. I'll never be able to make that sound. It's too hard. I can't make my tongue do what my tongue is supposed to do to make that S." Mason also has perceptions about what's going on outside of him, what the world is telling him about the barriers to success for him. There are people talking. You'll never be able to do it. You're just being lazy. It's not that hard, Mason. What's wrong with you? Some barriers are objective barriers, like maybe it's a long way to the place where the clinician is practicing, and Mason has difficulty finding a ride for his sessions. That is a perception of Mason's of an obstacle to self-improvement. These obstacles exist. They all exist in Mason's perception, but these perceptions are of two kinds. One are perceptions about his own willingness, ability, capability to achieve his goals. We call that ego impedance. The other set of perceptions Mason has are perceptions about things going on in the outer world that create barriers to improvement. We call those obstacle dominance. When ego impedance or obstacle dominance comes into play, we need techniques beyond the simple clinical practices that so many clinicians develop expertise in. We need counseling. We define counseling as caring support from the clinician. Caring support in the form of information that we give to the client, guidance given to the client, or assistance provided to clients, families, caretakers, and advocates so the clients can use such insights to pursue realistic and clearly understood goals, as well as attain a more fulfilling quality of life. Quality of life is always the target of counseling in audiology and speech-language pathology. Now that we define counseling, I'd like to turn the proceedings over to Cari Tellis, who will discuss our approach in counseling and interviewing in speech-language pathology and audiology, our approach to counseling consisting of practical models to create and maintain improvement. Cari?
Thank you very much, Lonnie, and good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining us today. We're very excited about the work we've done with this book and have a lot of very empirical examples to share with you throughout the book, especially according to the models that we present here. And we feel like, if you're instructing using this book, you're going to be given some very, very useful, easy to understand, easy to teach, ways to apply the models and the strategies that we've seen work in therapy, as well as see students use them actually outside of their own lives. So it's kind of been very interesting. So in our case with Mason, seems pretty simplistic, I guess, in a way, that we have this, child who has an articulation issue, and it seems like it would be smooth sailing until things get in the way. And we do know that some of the main objectives our clients will have, and kind of the top three that we see happen in terms of goals that our clients have, are either to improve their ability to produce a certain sound, and certainly Mason would fall into that category. Maintain function, which would be really, something we would see in a client who has, maybe end stages of dementia, maintaining their cognitive functioning to for as long as they can, and then certainly individuals who want to return to a function that they had, someone who has new onset of hearing loss and can use a hearing aid to kind of gain back, much of their hearing. So we see these as our main objectives for the clients, and certainly in those objectives, we would see them kind of straightforward, see them as therapy goals. Our main objective for our clinicians is to remain functional in the approach that they take to their therapy and their strategies. And we know as instructors that that's one of our primary aims that we're teaching our clinicians, our students, to apply to their clinical situations. And so we've developed some models that we feel like are very, very self-explanatory in a way, and really can be applied not only to our clients, but to our clinicians, and certainly when teaching new clinicians how to approach therapy. We feel like a lot of these models are very, very good for our students to apply to themselves and looking at the way they approach their clients. We kind of see it as a twofold mechanism in that way, and then certainly see it extend beyond that to family members and caregivers as well. In our own aspect, when we're looking at those people and how they're involved with the cases, and certainly looking for any roadblocks they may cause in the process. Our first model is called the Counseling Integration Matrix, or the CI Matrix. And in this matrix, you'll see on the one axis that we're looking on a negative impact on quality of life, and you can see that can either be low or it can be high, and obviously there's a spectrum there. And then we counter that against the client's willingness to change. And again, that willingness either being low or high. And if you can see throughout this, you see kind of the progression throughout the matrix. We want to make you, allow you to understand that we don't see this necessarily as a linear process, that you start with one and you end in the other. But certainly we do see most clients start with our quadrant 1 and then end up in quadrant 4 here. So you see quadrant 1 being the first quadrant we would ultimately usually see clients reside in. They have that initial dissatisfaction and really feeling like this wasn't affecting me as much, this issue, and now it is. So we see a high impact on quality of life, and their high willingness to change, because if you're dissatisfied, you certainly would like that to be taken care of. And looking at clients in that, their need for counseling is certainly different than someone you could see in a different quadrant. So in the book, we do provide examples of emotions and reactions and feelings that a client would have in quadrant 1, and then supply some of the models that we'll talk about later, but specific strategies to deal with clients within quadrant 1. Quadrant 2 is a client who is going to have remain having a high impact on quality of life. And as therapy progresses, you often see in clients, a realization that this is going to be a lot harder than they thought it would be to change, and their willingness to change becomes a little bit hindered as they progress through therapy. Again, we'll provide specific emotions and reactions that you might see in clients within Quadrant 2 and give strategies to deal with those specific situations. Quadrant 3, as someone progresses in therapy, hopefully the impact on their quality of life starts to lessen as they start to realize, more of an awareness of the issue, maybe deal with certain ways to handle specific issues and situations. And so we will see in Quadrant 3 a lower impact on quality of life, as well as there continuing to be a lower willingness to change. Still, as therapy is more difficult, we kind of see that, we see peaks and valleys of willingness to change as they see success in certain areas and see struggles as we start to generalize concepts. And then Quadrant 4 is kind of where we usually see, clients come to when they're ready to be dismissed. Their impact on quality of life, remains low, but they now gain a higher willingness to change, a high willingness to be able to, follow through with the techniques, become their own clinician, and we really see them be able to go on and do the things that they need to do. Once again, I want to remind you that although we talk about this as Quadrants 1, 2, 3, and 4, we do see that there will be times where clients come in actually evaluated at a specific quadrant that wouldn't be Quadrant 1, and one of those, it would be, for example, maybe a client who stutters, and we often see this in maybe an adolescent population where they've had a lot of therapy, and they may come in as Quadrant 3. They're not really affected necessarily a whole lot by it. Their priorities lie in other areas like, playing sports or being involved in the performing arts or school and things like that. So they're not really, desire much of a change. So we may see someone come in Quadrant 3, but then we look on the caregiver side, and maybe it's the parent who's really being the person who's spearheading therapy, and you'll see that a parent might reside in Quadrant 1, high impact on their own quality of life, high impact on their willingness to want the client to change, and now we see this like dissonance happen, and you really see where counseling can become very important with this kind of situation. We're trying to work hard with the client to get some motivation to want to be in therapy, and then we look on the side of the caregiver and trying to understand the client's perspective. So you can really see how powerful this matrix can be in evaluating clients, as well as caregivers, and certainly then the clinicians and their own engagement with each of their clients. The next model I'm going to talk about is the solution cycle, and Lonnie introduced the solution-focused approach that we take, identifying the problem, seeing these issues as the problem, and looking to, specifically focus on the goal and how we're going to get there, and we build on the successes and the achievements that the client has to reach the goals. And so we see this within a solution cycle. Again, we're all not really about linearity here. We see it as a circular process. It's what we call it a cycle. And we see that you can kind of move back and forth throughout the solution cycle as you're going through the therapy process. Another very good tool for students to identify the place that they're in within the solution cycle with their clients, and then certainly have that be a way to, teach clients, about the process and where they're going and even where they came from if you want to look back at another phase. So phase 1 is our learning phase. Certainly our instructions about interviewing are going to occur here, how we go about getting the clients to tell their story, teaching students how actually to do that. We focus on chronology and getting, when did this problem happen, what are the things that were involved in the issue, and really getting pertinent medical history here and understanding the process of the story. Certainly some of the specific strategies we're talking about here are observation skills, study and research, and also listening skills. Chapter 3 is an excellent chapter on listening skills, and there are a lot of very, very, very practical examples and strategies that are displayed in this chapter. I want to mention that we do have videos that go along with each of our main models and each of our strategies that show actual, video examples of some of the strategies we use. Phase 2 is our choosing phase. This is identifying the alliance base and understanding how important that circle of power is, what we call it. And we'll get into that a little bit more, but certainly skills that we're using in this phase is communication and listening and identification and staying positive and giving support. Phase 3 is envisioning, looking at setting goals, and we're going to talk a little bit about our way of setting goals and give you a model to consider when you're creating the goals. Certainly looking at obstacles and roadblocks, how we talk about dealing with resistance and reluctance, how to tell the difference between apathy and boredom, and so a lot of really cool strategies that we talk about in envisioning goals. And our phase 4 is achievement, making this all happen. Understanding the process of repatterning, dealing with a new reality sometimes, and we, kind of infuse in here achievement of those goals. I think it's very important when we're talking about counseling that we identify intentions of communication, and we talk about 5 intentions of communication and their importance and their application to each phase of the solution cycle, and certainly one may appear to be more important in one phase than another, but you certainly could use, all 5 intentions within the solution cycle. The first is information. Information being communication in the form of actually giving information to our clients. Education, we think it's very important, a part of counseling, that education is part of the process. We are teachers as clinicians, and transmitting that to students is you are a teacher when you are working with your clients, and you are going to provide information, and you need to be able to provide that information in a way that your clients understand it and could repeat it back to you. And we see that in an intention of communication being information, we're looking for clients' ability to be able to give us back the information that they've been educated on. Small talk is our second intention of communication, and we kind of talk about this as rapport building, a way to build a relationship with your client, start to have your client see you as a human being, as a person that they can trust, and small talk's a great way to make that all happen. And a lot of students have a hard time with small talk. They feel like it's very awkward in their clinic sessions to say, well, what do I do? How do I bring up, ideas to get my client talking? Certainly in evaluations, we see this happen when we need to get a language sample, and small talk's the way to work towards getting that language sample, find something that interests the client and get them talking about it. So multifaceted communication intention in a small form in terms of small talk. So a real powerful intention of communication. Self-affirmation is the third one we'll talk about, and we use within the solution cycle and within counseling, certainly as a way to identify to clinicians when when it's necessary for them to explain to their clients, their own expertise and areas of specialization. It's more saying, here I am, I know what I'm doing, you can trust me, I've done this before, and that kind of talk lends itself for the intention of self-affirmation. And then certainly listening for it in their own clients. A client leaving the therapy session and coming back the next time saying, I'm really proud of myself the things that I struggle with, I was able to, try to do one thing this week. Maybe I wore my hearing aid more and I'm getting used to, the way it sounds, or, I ordered food at a drive-through window and I don't do that. And so looking for those times when self-affirmation is a key communication intention, and looking at that as improvement and something to jot down to say, hey, this client's doing things we want them to do. Persuasion is the next intention of communication. Obviously, inherent within its name is persuading, using that as an intention to have clients realize that maybe one technique or one strategy might be something they want to try. And if they're resistant to it, a persuasion intention can often be used as a way to make them more inclined to at least attempt it. So persuasion is used in many ways. Clinicians should look for that intention within their clients when maybe their client's asking for, a review of the objectives. These goals are too hard, or these goals are too easy. Can we try something different? And that might be a persuasion intention from a client to the clinician. And certainly it would be good to make students aware of that, so that they're looking for that. And then feeling and emotion, and we talk about this intention a lot throughout the book, because often people think of counseling in a counseling book, cannot be written without talking about the intentions of feeling and emotion. And these are things that we're going to be dealing with, and certainly, looking for strategies beyond just looking for a very apparent emotion, maybe searching deeper into a client's underlying emotions, or them saying and behaving in a way that says more than what you might actually think. So when we talk about advanced communication skills later in the book, we talk more about identifying emotions that might not actually be explicitly said. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about each of our phases of the solution cycle and just kind of reiterate some of the main points we talk about in the book that I think are very helpful instructional tools to use. Phase 1 is learning. Again, we talk a lot about interviewing skills here. Chapter 5 is dedicated directly to that. We don't stop there and say interviewing is just done during your evaluation. It's no, you do a mini interview every time you meet with your client to find out information about the past week, to figure out what's going on. We talk a lot about intentions of information and small talk here, certainly self-affirmation. We stress a lot of the the concept of education and validation, clients, how important that is for clients. I mentioned too, our interviewing chapter really seeks to identify the strategies to be a very good listener. We believe that all listening is active, so we talk a lot about how important that is, and we give, we provide actually, a mechanism for our clinicians and new students becoming clinicians to really seek to first understand and really work towards listening in that capacity before making a judgment. And certainly we will eventually have to say something to our clients that provides them with our judgment of what we just listened and understood. Throughout that process, we do talk about some of our more basic counseling skills, things like responding with empathy, the difference between sympathy and empathy. We talk about how to construct an actual empathetic response, something like within the formula of, I see you feel this way because of this, and then we talk about how to actually communicate that and not sounding so formulaic. We talk about, the power of listening skills like eye contact and leaning forward and maintaining an open posture. We talk about positioning and setting up the client room so that you're really putting yourself in a situation where you can listen without distractions, and we talk a lot about that within the book. And then we do talk about the actual response once we make a judgment, and hopefully it's an informed judgment, that we have a response that's really tailored to what we want to say to our clients. Phase 2 is choosing our alliance base, looking for those individuals that will create the circle of power, that will kind of be our team effort within our therapy journey with our clients. And one thing I want to talk about here specifically is we do talk a lot about something called an undeclared adversary, someone who appears to be an alliance and a support system, but is really kind of blocking or obstructing path to success for our clients. And so we talk a lot about that alliance base, looking for those individuals that are going to be helpful, looking for those individuals that aren't, and then we give practical strategies and how to address those people who we want to enlist as allies, and how to deal with those individuals who have become adversaries or who we see in the future may be potentially becoming an adversary. Phase 3 is envisioning our goals, and I told you that we would go over an acronym that we use in teaching how to create goals. And obviously we know how our, if you've taught for a while and been a clinician a while, we know we need our do statement, our condition, and our criterion. And we do believe that that's certainly important. But we find that must do as an acronym is very helpful in instruction and creating goals. In our acronym, M stands for measurable, looking that the goal has that criterion and that, it is certainly something we can measure, and we instruct on all aspects of measurement. Goals must be understood, not just by the clinician, but also by the client, and I stress that a lot in class with my students. You need to understand why you're doing what you're doing, and if you don't know why you're doing it, then you probably shouldn't be doing it. So understood, we feel like, is a very important part of goal setting. Certainly it needs to be solution-focused. You need to be actually looking toward the goal. Needs to be time-bound. We think that giving a time provides a way to, especially with new clinicians, a way to say, hey, at this point in time, I'm going to reassess and reevaluate how this goal is doing, especially if my client's not meeting the measure. D is doability, or it being doable to our clients, and really working with the client to say, all right, here I put together this plan, and I want to see what you think about it, and do you feel like it's doable for you? And if it's not, how can we structure our goals so that it can be more doable? And then observable is something that we can feel and see with our senses. Certainly goes to our measurability, but it being observable makes it more explicit for the clients. It makes it something that should be more easily understood because they can see it, they can understand it, they can hear it. It's something that they're going to use, and we talk about strategies to make all of these possible with our must-do criteria. Phase 4 is achievement of our goals, and we feel like motivation is kind of an underlying part of the entire solution cycle, and we talk about it a lot within these chapters in achievement, but certainly we see this as being part of the whole entire process. We use the terms purpose, growth, and ownership as kind of underlying our whole, balance of motivation, and we find that when one of these, purpose, growth, or ownership, is out of sync, we often see issues arise. And certainly we can look at motivation within the context of the CI matrix at even the very beginning of our evaluation of our clients to find what is going on with our client. And you can certainly see a person that's not motivated, we're going to need more counseling and maybe more of an integration of counseling within our therapy process. Purpose being the concept that the client understands why they're there and certainly has a target for what they would like to achieve. And we're certainly looking at that target throughout therapy and in a solution-focused approach that makes complete sense. Ownership, the term meaning that the client literally owns it. It is their process, it is their journey. They're the ones steering it. They're, driving the ship, and they're making it happen. And certainly when they feel like someone else, has ownership of the process, you could see how they could lack motivation and may have resistance to what they're doing. And then growth, when we go back to our objectives, certainly improvement sounds like a growth objective, and it certainly is. But we look for the objectives of our clients, whether it's return, and that would be seen as growth, or maintenance, we could also see that as growth because we're not, we're not losing ability. So we really do see the power of purpose, growth, and ownership. I have to say that working with my students and talking with them about purpose, growth, and ownership, I talk about that in the context of their own purpose, growth, and ownership that they have in their settings with each of their clients and analyzing themselves in the process. And so we kind of go through a little bit of the journey themselves throughout the process of the semester, working through this text in a little bit of their own self-actualization, taking some of Carl Rogers' techniques to figure out their own growth as clinicians and students. So these are really our main models, and kind of give you a glimpse of the textbook and how you can utilize it and the strengths. And we certainly are, we'll turn it to Eliana to ask any questions that you have.
Great. Thank you, Cari and Lonnie, both for that wonderful presentation. There's a lot of great information in there. At this point, I just want to let everyone know if you're interested in requesting a review copy of the textbooks, you can go to our website at go.jblearning.com/Tellis. And also, if you're interested in any sort of custom solutions for your course, whether it be publishing a custom version of this book or creating some new material for your courses, you can reach out to Dan Sowers. He's our custom guy here, and he'd be happy to hear from you. So at this point, we did have a couple of questions that came in through the chat. The first question is just asking about the level of this textbook. Is it primarily just for graduate students, or are these concepts that could be introduced at the undergraduate level?
We wrote this book so it could be used at any level. I think it could be used even at a freshman level. I really do, and I don't think it's written in a way that a graduate student wouldn't feel challenged by it, because I've used this book for over 8 years with the graduate class. And my main feedback is I wish I had this sooner, as I approached clinic. So it's really, I think it can be used undergrad and graduate.
Great. It's also valuable in a course that is fully devoted throughout the semester to counseling, as well as a course wherein counseling is a unit of the semester.
Absolutely.
Great. Another question, kind of building off of that a little bit, is we have someone wondering if this could be used or if it would be beneficial for a clinician or if it's just for students.
Well, it's funny, when we were at ASHA, we actually had a couple clinicians actually purchase the book, or I think one won it or something, and she was really excited about using it in her own practice. And after we had a talk using some of the same presentation that you heard today, we had a couple people walk up, and one person in particular had received the book as a review copy, and she had a colleague who was struggling with a client, and she actually ran to get the book and said, "Hey, use this, and here's some strategies that you can consider." And she said that her colleague was so thankful. So yeah, I think clinicians can use it as well.
Yeah, she said it would always be on her her bookshelf for the rest of her career. That was a point she made.
That's awesome. Krista, do we have any questions live on the line?
We do not have any questions at this time.
Okay. We do have just one other question that came through the chat. We have someone asking, in your experience or your opinion, what do you find students struggle the most with when learning about counseling and interviewing?
That's a really, really good question. I think their biggest struggle is how to actually phrase the things that they need to say to their clients. A lot of them understand the concepts and can identify when a client needs counseling or when they need a little support in that area, but they find it hard to put it into their own words. And I feel like that probably is one of the biggest struggles. I certainly see that as something that they tell me. By the end, so we do a lot of practical exercises because most of my students are actually in clinic at the time. And so as you follow through the book, like I said, it's kind of a journey within themselves in learning about themselves in the process of learning about how to deal with clients with issues, and certainly issues beyond maybe even just a production issue that would be considered maybe more of a therapy goal. And working on phrasing, we match them up, and I do a lot of exercises in class where they have to practice, in the context of class, so it's a safe environment, and then I urge them to actually try in the setting when they're in, in clinic. So we can go over what went wrong, how best to, go about it, what maybe they could have done instead. So I find that usually is, I know how to do it, I know what I'm supposed to say, but it's actually going about and actually saying it that when it's hard.
Yeah, in line with that, the younger clinicians often struggle with the realization that when they're in the room doing therapy, they are in charge. They are making decisions, and that can be frightening in the extreme. And one response to the book that's extremely positive is that the book has helped them to make those decisions situationally, existentially, right there when they're dealing with a client. That the book gives them really good guidance as to what strategy to use at a particular moment. So struggling with the notion that they're in charge and they're the ones making those decisions, they reported that the book and the accompanying instruction has helped them to make the right decision at the right time.
Yeah, I mean, the feedback I get from my students mostly when they write back to me after they've graduated is, thank God I had a counseling class, because I know what to do with these clients. And one interesting, comment a student made was that when she went to interview for CS physicians, she was often asked a lot of questions about what would you do with this particular client, and she used the concepts of purpose, growth, and ownership a lot throughout her interview, and she said that the interviewers were so impressed with what she came up with. So I thought that was kind of interesting as well.
Yeah, that's fantastic. We have one other question that came through the chat. Someone is asking if you've included information about cultural differences and their impact on counseling clients with communication disorders.
Yes, we do. We talk about that throughout the book. There isn't a dedicated chapter to it because we feel like it's important when you're dealing with individuals with linguistic cultural difference that it really applies throughout the book. I also urge my students in class, I have them take specific concepts that we can elaborate on, and that's certainly one of them, so we can get more into multicultural issues, but they are throughout the book.
Great, thank you. All right, well, that was the last question that had come through the chat. So I think that about wraps things up for us. I just want to thank everyone again for joining us this afternoon and remind everyone that they can go on our website to request a review copy, and also that this presentation will be recorded. It'll be posted to our YouTube channel in about a week or so. Cari and Lonnie, anything else you want to say to wrap things up?
Yes, thank you to everyone who tuned in. It's been a lot of fun and really enjoyable. I particularly enjoyed the questions. They were spot on, and we're really enthusiastic about the book, and great to have the opportunity to speak on it.
Yeah, and I guess, if there's ever any question about content in the book or, how to present it and you decide to adopt it, I'm very open to you sending me an email and asking. So if you ever need to get in touch, you're welcome to.
Well, thank you both again, and thank you everyone for joining us. I think that concludes our presentation today.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.